In his 39 days as a member of our family, Ziggy has brought us a lot of joy and fun and a few other things. In this episode of the I Can't See You podcast, I'll tell you about one of those other things and how we can now laugh at it.
From Studio B in Swarthmore, this is the I Can't See You podcast with David. It's like blind people for dummies.
Hello there, and welcome to episode 113 of the I Can't See You podcast. My name is David, at David Benj on all the socials. I really appreciate you joining me for today's episode, and I have to tell you, this is like take 27. And I have a couple of things to talk to you about today. One has to do with what started out as a scary story that we now laugh at, and I'll get to that in a little bit. You probably have an idea since you read the title of this podcast. But first I want to talk about, I know a few episodes ago, and by a few I mean like 6 months ago, I had talked about looking into my genealogy and to see where everybody was from. And the main reason, or one of the reasons I wanted to do that, was to try and get a second passport. Something that if the borders were closed to Americans, I'd still be able to get in. And I thought my best chance was going to be for Spain, but it just seems like it's too long ago. I can't really find anything on my great-grandfather, Florentino Hernandez. So I kind of ditched that. And I'm still looking just to see, where my grandparents were from, my paternal grandparents were from. I haven't found anything out. It's so difficult. Everything that I've done has just been like a stone wall, and I can't find the boat that they came in on. And now I'm wondering if my grandparents, Ben and Ida, were even married when they came to this country from Russia. From what I found, one evidently emigrated to the U.S. in 1900 and one in 1902. So again, sometimes those are, a little off, and it could be that they were on the same boat and married at that time. So I don't know. So I've searched the original name that they came in under. It was changed to Goldstein when they got here, or at least for my grandfather, the story my grandfather told my dad. And when I also searched, I searched for my grandmother's maiden name, and her maiden name was Leitner. Now, I always thought it was spelled Leitner, but I've also seen it spelled like light, Lightner, and can't find anything. And, one of the big issues, and this is this is probably the only part of this podcast that I talk about that really has to do with my vision. I can't go back and read the different documents that, like a ship's manifest or, a census report. I can read the printed out stuff because my computer can read it to me, or I could zoom in enough where I can then highlight it and have it read to me. So to go back and look for, handwriting, I can't read handwriting ever. And it's been long before I was legally blind. I became legally blind probably 2007, 2008. I've been low vision, as I've mentioned, my entire life. Handwriting has always been an issue. When I was in school, it was easier for me to read it. And of course, back in those days when I was in school, computers weren't really in the classroom until probably early to mid high school for me. I graduated in 1982. So at that point, I remember doing, not that I had a computer at that point. At that point, I do remember doing some basketball games we did for the TV, the little inside the school TV station, the closed circuit TV. I did a color commentary on basketball games, and I remember we had played, or the teachers of the school had played the Philadelphia Eagles, and members of the Eagles had a basketball team, and they went around and they did it to raise money for Eagles charities, and it was a lot of fun. And I got to interview one of the Eagles at the time. His name was Jamal Wilkes, and so we used a computer to do graphics for that. And that was the first time that we had used a computer in the school. And I think there was a computer class that you could have taken in school at that point, an elective, of course, at that time. And now, of course, you can't go to school without having some sort of computer. Even Liz's classroom, which is preschool and kindergarten, on snow days like today, Thursday, I'm recording this the day the episode drops, they do, learning via Zoom, and each kid has a Chrome notebook that they take home and they can do their work on and, communicate. Sometimes they're not doing the work on the computer, but they're being taught on the computer if they have questions or different lessons. So very different, obviously. So, when I'm looking up something on one of my relatives from back in the day, if it hasn't been digitized to the point where, I don't mean just scanned and, because again, it's a picture and they don't usually put the alt text in. And if they do put alt text in, the alt tag will say, ship's manifest or something like that. So, it's really, I can't do it. Now I have to tell you, I zoomed in the other day. I'll get to it in a second. Let me backtrack and tell you, so I've been fixated with trying to get citizenship somewhere else. Just again, so I could leave, we could leave, the family could leave and go somewhere else should we need to. And I started thinking about this, at the beginning of 2020 when, things were getting bad with COVID, and then you had the protests and riots, and I just saw a lot of bad things coming. And I thought, well, what would we do if we had to go in a hurry? Where would we go? And at that point, the Canadian border was closed, and I don't remember if the Mexican border was closed. I wasn't too interested in fleeing south, and I certainly wasn't interested in having to get on a boat and go somewhere, because you read all those horror stories back at the beginning of the pandemic where the boats couldn't dock anywhere, and so I certainly didn't want to be at sea and then run out of food and whatever. So I started to look, and I thought, okay, well, we'll search maybe, Spanish, Cuba. I'm one generation away from Cuban. So I don't know if I could do that. I don't know if I would want that. Russian, I could probably do as well. Again, my grandparents supposedly were from Russia. They claimed Russia in all the documents that I found. I don't know if that's true. The original name is Volinsky, and there's a town in Ukraine called Volinsky. So maybe originally they were from there. I don't know. And I know that the area of Russia that my grandparents were supposedly from was very close to an area that flip-flopped from Russia to Poland and back and forth. So there were times that we thought that we were from Poland. And so I looked into that. I haven't found anything at all that showed that. So the other day I was reading an article about something, and I thought, if we can only there's only a way to get into an EU country, then you could live anywhere. And again, as I mentioned back then, goal would be to live somewhere in the Mediterranean, Spain, France, Italy, Greece, wherever. Our neighbor is French, and she said, oh, you don't want to live in France. It's no good. You need papers all the time. They're always asking for your papers. And she told us the story about her sister and some friends that had gone somewhere, and they were pulled over because they were in a car and they weren't wearing their masks in the car. And she said how horrible it is in France. And meanwhile, she does own property there, and her family is still there. But as we start to look, and again, it's obviously not going to be until further down the line, once, COVID subsides, we'll take a closer look. Again, having the roots sometime back in the day in Spain, warmer in Spain, especially as you go further south, along Costa Blanca or Costa del Sol, sounded good to me. Now, evidently my family roots in Spain or in the Canary Islands, heard it's very nice, but, I don't know if I want to live on an island. I like the idea of being, on the mainland. If you live, from Barcelona down to Malaga, you can jump on a plane quickly and go to someplace else, or jump on a train and go quickly to someplace else within the EU. So I've always wanted, if you have that EU passport, again, you've got 26 places, 26 countries you could go to. So the other day I come across this list of EU nations, and I'm like, oh, let me just scan it to make sure there's, I didn't think Russia was on there. But as I'm scanning it, I see Poland come up. And for whatever reason, I never thought of this before. Liz's grandfather, at the time, wasn't sure if it was grandfather and grandmother, or just grandfather or just grandmother. Well, it turns out Liz's grandfather was born in Poland in 1906. The problem is he left Poland in 1913. And to be eligible for a Polish passport, Polish citizenship, you had to be in Poland once they became an independent nation in 1918, actually. And I think you had to be 1920 was the actual the date. So by 7 years, we missed that. So I had dug into it. And as I'm looking through all this documentation and everything, I thought, man, this is so cool. You see the different, ship's manifest of the ship that he came in on. And I have to tell you, again, I can't read handwriting, but whoever wrote the manifest for that ship that her grandfather came in on, it was like a font that you would see, like a really fancy font that you would look on your computer. Oh, this would look great for invitations. That's how nice the handwriting was on the person who did the ship's manifest. And maybe that's how they got the job, because they had really nice handwriting. Again, I couldn't read it, but wow, was it nice. So I then I had signed up for a membership for MyHeritage, which .com. I'd never signed up for and paid for anything. And I had looked into doing, and again, this is before I thought of, looking at Liz's side to, try to get the EU passport. I'm genuinely interested in, where my paternal grandparents are from and finding some lineage there, as well as to track down, was Florentino born in Spain, or was he born in Cuba, as other documents have suggested? Was my grandfather born in Cuba in 1888, or was he born in Key West, Florida? Like, again, there's some say one and some say the other. So the reason I wonder about my grandfather, and his name was Roy Hernandez, Regilio was the Spanish name. Roy was born in 1888 or 1888, if I remember correctly. His mother, Tomasa Lopez, was from Cuba and emigrated to the U.S. in 1905 or 1906. Now, how could Roy have been born in Key West, Florida in 1888 when the mother wasn't here? So I'm confused by that. It just doesn't add up. It doesn't add up that she didn't come to this country until 1905, 1906, but yet Roy was born here in 1888. So I'm a little confused by that. So I'll continue to look. And, so when I signed up for MyHeritage, the very cool thing, and I can't find anything out about the Hernandez side. However, I've been able to find out a lot of stuff about Roy Hernandez's wife, Pauline, my grandmother, Polly Hernandez, maiden name Ellerby. I've gone back to 5 greats. So I have her, she's my grandmother, and then 5 greats, great 1, great 2, great 3. And I was always told, and my mom always was told, that she was Irish. There was only one Irish person in the whole mix. Maybe 2, sorry. Maybe there's 2. Maybe a great that was, both sides of the great, whatever great number it was. I don't remember if it was grade 3 or grade 4. Again, you have 4 grandparents, and then you have 8 great-grandparents. So it just explodes exponentially as you go out. One of my great, set of great-grandparents might have both been born in Ireland. However, I have multiple more than two, multiple, at least four, maybe five, of folks that were born in England, mostly Yorkshire, which I thought was very cool. The last one that I had seen on the going all the way back, my fifth great grandparent, his name was John Ellerby, born in 1688 in England. So I thought that was very cool because all through school, when we had to do family trees, I went to my grandparents and that was it. And so that part has been very cool, and I'll continue to look. And it's a bummer that it doesn't look like we'll have any kind of shot of getting EU, getting an EU passport unless you do, the Portugal golden visa or whatever that's called, where you spend a lot of money. We don't have that kind of money to do that. And, time, yes, we have time, but, we're not there yet, because we can't go there yet. And in the meantime, I had talked to a friend of mine from the Keystone chapter. Her name is Donna. She has dual citizenship. She's been here, I forget how many years she told me, quite a few years, decades. And she goes back and forth even now. She had last gone to Poland, I think in August. When she's flying to Poland, she uses the EU passport, and when she obviously comes home, she uses the American passport, and and that was okay. She was able to do that. So we were talking about it. So, I was asking her some questions about that, and so it's a bummer that we couldn't get in with that, but very cool how I'm finding out some more things about both my family and Liz's family. I'd looked into her family. For example, her maternal grandfather was adopted by her maternal great grandfather, I guess he would be, but does that make him a grandfather if he adopted? I guess great grandfather. And the mother, John, his name was John. His mother had come to this country before the son. So I don't quite know. So similar to what I was saying earlier, except the mother came to the country first. The mother had the great grandmother was raped, had this child, and had come to America. So I don't know, the grandfather didn't come to the U.S. until he was like 6 or 7 years old. Who did he come with? I don't know. What I don't know. I also don't know what the mother's maiden name is. I couldn't find that anywhere to kind of trace back all that stuff. So it's just cool things to look at. And then, in the recent days, I was looking at Liz's father's side, and Lindsley is Liz's maiden name, and a lot of Lindsleys in the UK, and that is, Vincent has that was Liz's dad has lineage to the UK. I don't remember Scotland or England. I don't remember where, but very cool looking back. And I just can't go back too far. And so it's been cool. Except like I said, can't get into the EU. It seems. So now the main part of the story, which Ziggy has been so much fun, and just some of the stuff that he's doing as he's growing. And again, he's today he's 92 days old today. Just listening to him, and he doesn't bark yet, though a couple of times he's come close, and he kind of has seemed to, he cries when something goes on, or he'll growl when he's, when we're messing around. At least I hope he thinks we're messing around and he's not he's not being serious. And to watch him and to see how he's learned so many things. We call him 8 million different things. And the fact that he knows that his name is Ziggy is, shows that he's got some sort of smarts to him, because we call him everything. And now we've added Snoop Dogg. And I'll get to that story in a second. But watching him race around in the snow, we've had another bout of snow. And let me just stop about Ziggy for a second. we lived in a condominium where we did not have to shovel anything for about 4 years and 4 months. We moved here, and already we've shoveled at least 4 or 5 times. So it's just kind of funny that, in all the years that we lived over at the condominium, I think we had 2 snows that required, significant shoveling or cleaning the car off before we had the carport. After we had the carport, it didn't matter. It's just kind of funny. We've been here, basically 5 months, and we've already shoveled, like I said. I can't tell you how many times. So watching him run around in the snow, he absolutely loves it. We let him off the leash in the snow. Our backyard is fenced, though the back of our, of our yard has a small fence. And as he gets bigger, he's going to be able to jump over it. And we're already seeing him, the jumping that he does. For example, when he comes down the stairs from the second level to the main level, if he's excited or in a hurry for something, he will jump from the 3rd step. He doesn't, if he's going slowly, he usually touches them all. But if he's in a hurry, he will jump from the 3rd step. He's also found that our stairs are going up 3 or 4 steps. You can get onto the couch, and I may have mentioned this last week. You can get onto the couch because our railing doesn't have the spindles. It has like a wrought iron design. And there's a couple of spots, and we're afraid that he's going to try it a little higher up. So we're going to Home Depot this weekend to try and find something to stop that. Liz said we could just train him, but in the meantime, training him, he still could come over 4 or 5 or a dozen times, and either hurt himself or hurt Jane or whoever is sitting on that short couch. But it's just so much fun. For example, you say treat, and he knows what you mean. If he whines to go out and we let him out, like Liz sometimes will let him out if she's in the middle of cooking dinner. Instead of going out with him, she'll open the door, let him out, watch him. And as soon as he goes, say, gets all excited and say, good boy, all right, come on back in for the treat. And he races back in. So that part is very cool. And the fact that when you say night night, he will go into his cage. But when he hears night night, he expects a couple of treats. So over the last couple of days, he has gone into his cage. Last night he did it on his own without expecting anything. Today he went in there and went and sat so properly and looked at me like, hey, look what I did. Don't I deserve something? I didn't give him anything for that. And we didn't give him anything last night. And so I'm hoping that he gets more comfortable going in there because, it's a space that, and I never closed the door when he had gone in there last night while Jane and I were watching TV. It was fine. He stayed in there, and I actually woke him up at one point to take him out one more time. So I thought that was kind of cool. So just to watch him grow and develop and all that has just been great. Now here's the story. The other day, Monday, President's Day, and don't get me started, it's not really called President's Day. Congress hasn't changed the name of Washington's birthday, but everybody calls it that. Monday, the 15th of February, Jane and I are in the kitchen, and Ziggy is laying on the floor sleeping, and Jane is looking at him, and she's like, he doesn't look like he's breathing. He's not breathing, he's not moving. So I just pet his head, and he, stirs a little bit, not a lot. And Jane is a little worried. I said, well, all right, well, pick him up and let's take him in the other room. And so when she picks him up, she's like, he's wet. And she's like, was there a puddle there? At that point, there was, the snow had mostly melted from our yard. There was still some piles of it, but he hadn't been out in a while. And nobody else had come in the back door. So we wondered what it could be. And she's like, I think he had an accident. But there wasn't any kind of puddle. It wasn't a lot. It wasn't like a typical accident. It wasn't like So we're worried. And then, we're drying him off with some paper towels. And he's not going after the paper towels. And Jane is like, he doesn't look right. And at that point, Liz comes downstairs and, and said he doesn't look right. And we're looking at him and we end up running over to a store close by that had, some, basically like spot spray. And I mean spot like you would use on a carpet, not spot like a dog. So you spray a little on, because again, it wasn't a lot, but, we also didn't want to give him a full-blown bath. None of us were ready for that. So, as Liz is doing that to him, he's not going after the towel as she's drying him off or the paper towel. He's just standing there. And so they were concerned. Jane and Liz were concerned, which of course made me concerned, that something was wrong with him. So Liz calls the vet and, she explains everything to them. And, okay, bring him over. And the main reason we chose our vet is they are very close, 5 minutes away. We're in Swarthmore, they're in Wallingford. It's very close. It's great. So they take him in, and most places in this area, and I'm guessing the state, I don't know. When you take a animal to the vet, they come out to the car, grab the animal, take the animal in, and then call you on the phone while they're examining the animal or right after they have examined the animal. And so, Liz and Jane are waiting in the car. Jane went. I did not go. Yeah, we didn't see any problems. They thought, when they talked on the phone, when Liz had initially called, they thought, hey, maybe it's, a urinary infection or something like that. He eats just about everything outside. And that's part of the problem. There are pebbles in our yard. I mentioned the wood chips. So who knows what he's been eating? Well, as she was talking to Liz, the vet was saying to Liz, I'm not going to judge, but kind of seems like there might be marijuana in his system. And we're like, okay. Jacob has a medical marijuana, whatever you call it. I don't know what you need to have. Whatever you need to have, card, I guess. So he goes each week to a place and he buys whatever it is he buys. But of course he can't smoke it inside because we don't want we don't want the house to smell like that. And, I grew up in a house where my mom smoked, not marijuana, cigarettes, which is probably worse, where I would come home from school and she'd be sitting at a table in what we called the den, where our back door was to. And you could see there was like a level of smoke that, was, a few inches down from the ceiling. It's like when the fog is rolling in, in a city, where the tops of the buildings get covered up. That's what it was like with, and I asked my mom finally, I said, Mom, I said, maybe when you smoke, maybe if you just crack the storm door a little bit so, kind of brings in some air and lets some of that smoke out. And she did. And we always laugh that she made it to 90 with all the cigarettes that she smoked in her life. But somehow, whatever Jacob was doing to rinse whatever he uses to smoke, there was either residue or maybe he dropped some. And, with all the snow, if he's been rinsing it into the snow, the dog has been eating the snow like you wouldn't believe. He loves ice cubes. When I make iced tea and he hears me hit the button on the fridge, the 2 dings to get to the crushed ice, he hears that, he comes running in and he waits. And he, as some of the, chopped up ice fall to the floor, he ends up getting it and, eating it. He loves it. So snow is just, so I don't know if Jacob had rinsed something out and, it was all concentrated in one area in the snow, whatever it was, Siggy was high. And, he just was like lethargic. Surprisingly, he didn't have the munchies. Although I got to tell you, it always seems like he has the munchies. So when they left, before they had gone to the vet, it kind of reminded me, or as they're driving to the vet, before they got to the vet, I'm sitting at my computer and I started to think back of Zamboni, who was our dog back. Zamboni died in 2004, August 3rd, 2004. And I remember how things went down with him it kind of reminded me of that. And I was a little worried. And, then when Liz called and I couldn't tell if she was laughing or crying at first. And I'm like, oh no. And then I could tell she was laughing because Jane started laughing. I said, what's so funny? And Jane yelled out, Ziggy's high. So of all the things that he eats, that was probably not the best. I mean, he loves cords. I always tell him, I said, electrocution means dead, and we don't want you to do that. Don't chew on the cords. And even today, while Liz was teaching, he was chewing on the power cord from the, she was charging her computer or had her computer plugged in. So, he doesn't really understand or I seem to care what he eats. And so, it was for a few minutes, for a good 10, 15 minutes, I was worried, and I know Liz and Jane were both very worried. But, of course, now looking back at it, gave him another nickname, Snoop Dog. And again, we have a million names for this poor dog. We call him Ziggy most of the time, but I gotta believe if I was across the room and I said, "Hey, buddy," he would come over. Pal. He does this thing now where he chases his tail and spins around in a circle so fast. I started calling him Taz, like the Tasmanian Devil. Just a million different names. And then, of course, I add stuff to the word zig, zigzag. I mentioned that before. But, we were really worried for a short time, and we were happy. We were happy that he was okay. So he continues to grow, and I can't wait to tell you more stories about him in the coming weeks. I'm sure there'll be more crazy shenanigans by him. And I know he likes it when we're all home. Like today, everybody's been home. Jane has been working remotely. Liz worked remotely today, and actually Jacob has to go to work soon. But he loves when we're all home because, he gets all excited when somebody new comes in the room, and it could be somebody new from 10 minutes. After 10 minutes have gone by, Liz goes upstairs for a few minutes. He seems to love Liz and stays with Liz the most. Probably a good idea. I'm just his playmate. Jacob and Jane, little of both. So it's just a lot of fun, and glad that I didn't have bad news to say about the dog. But it is funny now looking back. So that will do it. That's what I have this week for you for episode 113 of the I Can't See You podcast. Remember, you're looking for coffee, ican'tseeyou.com/coffee. I Can't See You sounds like a whole sentence, but it is only 7 letters long. ican'tseeyou.com/coffee to make a purchase at White Cane Coffee Company, the Keystone chapter of the National Federation of the Blind of Pennsylvania. Earns a 10% commission for any qualifying purchase. So please check them out. ican'tseeyou.com/coffee. A good organization is White Cane Coffee Company, and a great organization also is the Keystone chapter, of which I am the treasurer, and it would be very helpful if you'd follow that link and made a purchase. I'd greatly appreciate that. And also, if you have any ideas on upcoming shows or you have some comments, both good and bad, 646-926-6350. Give me a call. You have up to 3 minutes. Leave your questions or comments. I'd really appreciate those. And please let me know if it's okay if I use those in an upcoming episode, especially if it's a question. Comments, say whatever you want, and I might even play it even if they're negative and you use some not so nice words. It'd be okay. Probably be funny. So again, 646-926-6350 is that number, or reach out via email, ican'tseeyoupodcast@gmail.com, and let me know your ideas and some guest ideas if you have them. I've been a little hesitant to schedule guests because, as I've mentioned previously, I haven't been getting a lot of computer time, and I'm not sure that if I had to schedule something during the day, I'd be able to get it done. But let me know, and if you have something that you think would be beneficial for you being on, that would be great, and I'll set something up. Again, thanks again for listening to this episode 113 of the I Can't See You podcast. My name is David. Reach out on social media @DavidBenge. Again, thanks for listening. Continue to stay safe. Wash your hands. Wear your mask. And I guess now we have to wear 2 masks, but 1 mask will do if you want to get near me. You don't have to wear a mask if you don't want to, but please don't come close. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to the I Can't See You podcast with David. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen. And don't forget to share the podcast with your friends.